All right, everybody's rejoining us. Get started here in a moment. Good morning again, everybody, and welcome to Sunday Morning Zen here at the LMC. And before we get started with this morning's speaker, I just wanted to remind everybody, if you appreciate programs like this, like Sunday Morning Zen or Commit to Sit or some of our great classes, please join us in our mission by donating. We really appreciate it. It goes a long way towards keeping us able to bring programs like this to the public. And you can donate by going to zlmc.org and clicking on the link labeled Generosity up of the menus. So this morning's speaker is Diane Grimard Wilson, and she's going to be giving a talk this morning titled Zen and Making Brain Dance. And it's wonderful because Diane just released a book back in May. It's pretty recent. And it was her second book called Brain Dance. And the same week it was released, it became an Amazon #1 bestseller in the area of Buddhism and neuroscience. And Diane's a coach, a psychotherapist, and applied neuroscientist. Her passion is working with high-stress, high-performance individuals to achieve peak performance. And she began her meditation studies and practice in the 90s. And Brain Dance includes a description of retreat she attended in 2011 with Master Thich. So we're very honored to have her here this morning, and thanks so much. And we're ready to hear from you.
Thank you. You're good here. Thank you. I can't see. Okay, good to go. Okay, I just want to give you applause for being here this morning. Get the applause out of the way. In case there's one, but thanks for being here. I'm really honored. This is the first in-person talk since the pandemic. I'm honored to be here. Actually, I'm sort of honored to be anywhere. I'm happy to have made it through the pandemic this far, all of us. And but I'm really honored to be here, especially. Wanted to start with just a moment in terms of the people that made this possible. It just, in meditating this morning, it became really profound for me that what goes into, us being in a pandemic and being alive and here present, all the healthcare workers that long hours, risk, death, and the scientists who spent months in record time developing a vaccine that's working, and all that went into that, all very careful masking. Today, everyone here is vaccinated. It's a big airy room, and so we're maskless. But just to bring appreciation to all of that, just bring myself present. This is a very special place for me. That the book here, Brain Dance, is nurtured by my practice. Oh, sorry, I feel so emotional. But through it, there's a Buddhist thread, and I just think that that's kind of a thread that has followed through my life, and just made a lot of really good things possible. So this talk is informal in some ways. I'm going to answer a few questions, and in the process of writing this and putting this together, launching it, and now I feel like I came up with some secrets, some insights that people would be better for knowing, just things I'm learning along the way. So I'll cover those as questions and tell you about my story. I won't tell you all the secrets because I really want you to read the book. So yeah, the book is going well every single day. I mean, speaking of gratitude, I just try to live with a lot of gratitude, but every single day someone will come up, it's the most amazing thing, and say, yesterday it was like someone at the farmer's market said, I put this in the library at my condo so that people can read it, because I want people to read it. And it's just like little and big things. It's so incredible. So some of the questions, so in creating art, and I think that we're all artists in some ways, and so that's the point of contact, I think, for everyone. There's the thing that we can learn from perhaps my process and errors along the way, it has to do with creativity and with life, and making this and making our brain dance, being healthy and present. So some of the questions I have for you are, what is brain dance? I'll tell you about that. What's it about? And why I wrote this. Some truths I learned, and what helps us create. I have 40 pages of notes, just in case you're worried. I learned a lot about what makes creative projects come together, like some real magical things happen, just sort of unbelievable things. And lastly, I think, what's it like for me now? So I'll start, and then we'll have, this will probably go pretty fast. I'll have time for questions. And for those of you who are take on the mission, in sharing the book, it's about science, neuroscience, and the most miserable moments of my life and all, but actually it's been really fun to make videos to share the messages, the good messages in dance. So for those of you who would like to, we're going to make some little videos from my social media. Your eyes are getting really big. I wasn't learning for this. That's been a really fun part of sharing this. So what is brain dance? It's a medical memoir. It's about a period of my life that was from 2005 to 2011, and it's about a journey. I think what's most astonishing is that it could happen to anyone, any single person this could happen to. I was sitting on Austin, going north, waiting to turn left onto Harrison, sitting still at the light, and a guy drove into me. He took a wide turn on Harrison and drove into my car. Like, without permission or advance notice, my life changed a lot. Emergency room, those things. But I have to say, it wasn't the worst accident. There are a lot of accidents that are a lot worse. And I think that's kind of what made this story interesting for me, and the need to share it is that there are probably a lot of people like me who have gone through these things, and because they're not massively, worse, their life is still turned upside down, but they don't necessarily have a language, a way of understanding that. So that's part of the impetus for sharing the journey, is to share what can happen if something happens with your brain. So my life just kind of rolled along. I had physical therapy for my head and neck. I knew I had a moderate concussion. I was sort of fine. I took a 6-week leave from work because it felt like nothing turned out that I did. Just took 6 weeks off. I read my Christmas cards in February. I lost my keys a lot. Basically, if you look from the outside, you would say my life wasn't working, but from the inside, I'm like a fairly happy person. And so I made it through that period of time, and I just kind of didn't know the story of my life. I had just finished my first book. I promoted it. I had a great publicist. I was on CNN, ABC, NBC, a lot of really good press engagements, a lot of sharing of the book. It went very well. And I didn't do much after that. I just felt like I was waiting for something, and waiting for my life, waiting to get better, going to physical therapy, although I couldn't drive. But see, all these things fit together, but I didn't realize I was still injured. So one of the things I felt like I should do is to go back to start reconnecting with people, because I didn't see people very often. And I was just busy, and I'm not sure doing what. But so I went and met up with a friend of mine from Toastmasters. I'm shy, and when I promoted my first book, it took a lot of training, lots. I went to Toastmasters, they videotape you, they give you feedback, they hold your hand, they do all these because a shy person like me wants to promote a book and it wasn't natural, or it wasn't easy. So, but I met with one of my friends I had made, and I'm telling you, if you want to make friends, go to a Toastmasters group. Fear is bonding, and like the people in your group you are totally bonded with by the end of the first meeting, like I love you, you know, because you've been through these really fearful moments together. But for me, it was public speaking. But so my friend Georgia Andrianopoulos, incredible person, a neuropsychologist. So I met her for coffee and said, you know, I'm thinking about settling that insurance because, you know, I don't know what else to do, and they did run into me, and she goes, dear, I think you might benefit from getting a brain scan. And it was like, Georgia always knows good things. So I did, and when I got the results, I still had 7 months, that was 7 months later, a 96% chance of having moderate traumatic brain injury. So it was like I spent all that time kind of functioning, but injured. So it was astounding. It was profound. It was like these little circles on paper with like a lot of, like, it's color coded. It's like, wow, that's not the color you want for your brain. It's telling you that, you know, I still had a lot of slowing, and so that was really profound. And I'm grateful for applied neuroscience. That's like an amazing thing, because I think we can't regulate ourselves from the outside. We're like a GPS. You know, you go along, you follow their directions. If you take a wrong turn, it doesn't go, look, you know, straighten up, take the right turn. It just kind of resets. Rerouting, and that's what my brain did. It just kept rerouting. It wasn't like yelling at me or going, you need to do better. It was just like my inner GPS was keeping things, it's like hedonic adaptation. It's like we regulate ourselves so that so we function, we do our best. So anyway, then I found someone to do neurofeedback with, and I found this amazing woman, Dr. Elsa. So that was my life for the next 2 years, is seeing Dr. Elsa, a lovely human, and having treatment. And it made a huge difference. It really did. It was kind of fascinating, and that's the journey. Then here is like, in writing this, I didn't want to write, I wanted to do a lot of things, but I didn't want to write just science. I wanted people to go on the journey with me. It's like, this is the journey. This is like our kid, you know, Georgia, Elsa. And because I think that's, like, human stories are our best teachers. That human stories will help people understand the brain. That's my hope in sharing this, is that it's one thing for people to tell you about statistics, but it's another thing to go, wow, I went to the store with my shirt inside out, or something like that, you know. And it's okay. I mean, there are aspects of this that were truly funny, and they became funnier when I was writing about them. Some of them will never be funny, but anyway, I put them all in there, like day trading my husband's retirement account. You know, I was very curious. So just some really interesting things that happen in the stock market. So, but yeah, it was a very interesting time, and having my brain change and realize what was happening to me, and then kind of piecing together my life, and going through training. So that was funny. It was interesting. Changing your brain is interesting. That's what I do for a living now. That's my practice. And I remember the moment, just like little bits and pieces of the changes, like my husband telling me something, and then I'm trying to figure out what's next after the thing he tells me. And I get that sweet sort of look on his face, like it's very sympathetic, like she didn't understand me, I'm going to say it again. And it's like, no, I understand, like what's next? And so the little glimmers where I'm not wherever I was, talking. And my attention is coming back. I'm more present. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that people with diffuse injuries, like mine was a diffuse injury because it was a concussion, is like a lot of global things. It was such an interesting time to have it when I could finally talk about it, and people would go, oh, I read the book, A Stroke of Insight, and that's, a wonderful book. But actually what happened is that she had a stroke on one side of her head, and so the other side could observe it. And so it was quite specific. She couldn't talk, so it was on her left side, that she could observe it. And I mean, that's all good that she could write about it, just an amazing journey. But a diffuse injury is like the neurons stretch, because even if you don't hit something, your brain is moving around in this gel that protects it, and if you stop, if someone hits you, then it still moves and it stretches, and so things just don't work well. So that was the path of meeting Elsa. I mean, meeting Elsa was like an amazing thing. She's a pioneer in the field of neurofeedback. She invented the protocols for treating depression. She was just like this amazing person to me. That was like a bit of magic. It was also a bit of magic to meet up with Georgia and have her give me the hint. I really think Georgia could see what I couldn't see. It's like she was talking with me, and I'm just not sort of the same person. And that's what most people say, but that it just wasn't quite like me. A friend who ended up editing my book more than once, it was my neighbor. She lived across the street. She said, I thought you were mad at me all that time, because you just never seemed to quite know who I was, or you didn't seem to like connect with me. It's like, no, mystery. More like that. So that's what the journey was about. And then I was pretty lost. I mean, I didn't know the things that kind of governed my life before the injury were gone. One thing was Taekwondo. I loved Taekwondo, loved it. I loved sparring. I loved all the dance of sparring and breaking boards, and I loved it. It was just, and it was a really scary time with Hurricane Katrina, and people were being herded and treated unfairly, and I just had all these images of, like if I were there, I would go save them. It was, I mean, I was into being a martial artist, and it was like a calling, a way of life, and I had to give it up because I kept getting injured in class. So there were some real losses in that for me. My health club in my Taekwondo class was Barack Obama. Like, it was like a really fun, all the people, I loved them. And so, yeah, I just kept getting injured in class. And one day Elsa said, I can't treat you if you keep getting injured. It was like, what? I thought you liked me. This is my life. I can't do this. So I had to kind of re-find my life. So I went to be like Elsa. I wanted to be Elsa, which is just like this amazing woman. She's, I don't know how old she was then. She died very recently. But I mean, she could be like 100. I mean, she just got her PhD in her 60s. She was just an amazing person, took care of her husband, was very sick, and just did incredible things. She would go in there and she would go, look at all the new gadgets I have, this does this, and stay all day. It's like, I think I should pay you for more than one session. She goes, no, try this. And it's like hyperbaric oxygen, and just a real curious, kind and gentle Dianes person. So that was so I wanted to be like Elsa, which was kind of fascinating because when I first started my training, I didn't read books, and I wasn't trained my training in physiological psychology wasn't that deep. And so I also was pretty firm about, if you do this, you need to be board certified. You need to read all the important books and stuff. It was like, I'm in. And then I would go away and get them. And I'd have to look up, like, I remember thinking when this happened, like 5 words in one paragraph. I would have no idea what they were talking about, just none. And then Elsa found me all these internships in people's clinics. And so it's a midlife career changer, which I had done career coaching before. So I was up for that. I thought my career clients should do internships if they wanted to change. They should just find a place to do it and go help people. And that's what I did. I worked in different clinics and saw a lot of cases and met a lot of people that did the work and spent hours. The board certification process is really intensive. I did like 3 to 5 times more than what they required. It was a lot of training. But I felt like if I was going to put electrodes on someone's head and read brain scans, I needed to get it. I needed to like learn it from the inside out. And what was lucky is that for the board certification, you have to have had your own training. I had that covered in spades. I mean, I could have covered 5 people because I had a lot of training on myself. So that's what the book is about. It's about the work I do. It's about some of the funny stories of, just the things where you can see how important your brain is. One of the things that became really clear to me that I think should be hopefully clear for everyone is that your brain is really powerful. We look at people and we make decisions about who they are and what they do, people that are in abusive relationships or prisons or homeless or whatever, and get really judgy about what they should do. And I mean, I went through a moderate injury. My life turned upside down. Had I not people that could help me and help me find a path, I could easily be homeless. I could easily be, any of those categories of things. And so, and that was from sitting at a stoplight that I've sat at hundreds of times. This could happen to anyone. Especially when you think about it, like people that are abused, why don't they leave that person? It's like if someone knocked you in the head, like you probably couldn't even, it's not that easy to even figure out what you would do and plan it and get there and negotiate. It's just another world. And so there was a recent study in England about the percentage of women in prisons that have had head injuries. It was significant, very high. So the thing is that when you look at people and try to make judgments of them, think about the potential of in our own lives, the brain health is so important. Brain injuries can happen with head bumps, with, the studies are coming in where even college or high school football players that have had practices, not even concussions, can show evidence of that PTB, that pathology starting to creep in. So, in soccer, other sports besides football, as a practitioner, when you ask the question, have you ever had a head bump, people can't really answer that. I mean, they tell us that in training, that they give pages and pages of how to ask the question, because most people, they can't answer that question. I would say the same thing. It's like, have you ever had a head bump? It's like, no, no. Actually, I fell off swings, my mom would hit me in the head, those things. And so it's happened to all of us. And in working with, I do executive coaching, and working with people, you see them with impulse problems, and they just can't get through a meeting without blurting out something that they wish they didn't say, and sometimes you look at their brain scans and you see the signature elements of they probably had a head injury a long time ago, they don't remember it, or they felt fine afterwards like I did, or sort of fine, and so it's really stunning, and I'm always training, I'm always learning, but now I'm studying heart rate variability, which is really a key element of the work that I do, but now I'm way into it. I'm taking a 10-week course, I'm tracking this, but in elite athletes, heart rate variability is crucial. Olympic athletes, and they look at like not just is your heart rate smooth, but how fast can you move from one side of your nervous system to the other, parasympathetic, sympathetic, fight or flight, rest and digest. So really, elite performers will be able to make that shift back and forth very easily. Things will happen and they'll recover quickly. But so on one hand, we have people that are, their disabilities are getting the best of them, and on the other hand, as an example of brain health, you see elite performers do amazing things, and that's because of the brain training. So that's the spectrum as I see it. So that's basically, I wrote this because I felt like I was a lucky one. I'm gonna sit with that idea because I've known so many people, or people have told me about those that it's like something happened, they had a bump in the head, and their life is never the same. They're never the same people. They never, and they probably went to their doctor who was well trained for what they do, and it was like, well, I hope you get better. Like, I loved my doctor, and she was open to any idea I brought her, but she didn't say, oh, you should get a brain scan. She didn't know about them. I brought them to my therapist, my doctor, and they're like, what is this? Glad you're doing this, Diane. It's like, okay. So I think, and we all need to share tools. I had a lot of tools. I had neurofeedback. I sang, I learned, I felt like my life was turned upside down. And so I thought, I should learn how to sing. I always wanted to sing, life happens really quick here. So I joined Unity Temple and I learned how to sing. Actually, I did, which was really amazing. So it felt like an Oliver Sacks, the neurologist. It felt like one of his stories, like, oh my God, I can really sing. But yeah, it's a very strange thing. I started out as a second alto and I became a first soprano. It was just like, musically, it was a very, very interesting journey. And I still love it. But singing does help feed the brain. And I went on a retreat with Thich and Hanh. That was very exciting. Elsa wouldn't let me go on retreats early because I wanted to go on a lot of them. And she said, no, I don't want you sitting in theta, that's a brainwave, for 3 days. That won't help us because I already had too much theta. My brain was already way too, I had a dominance of slow waves from the injury, and that kept me scattered. And so she thought, that sitting in that for 3 days at that time was not a good idea, which tells you something that, that meditation is good, and the breathing patterns, the different kinds of meditations that we do some of them will work better than others at different times. There's a whole field called neuromeditation that I've been studying too. So so I felt like I was a lucky one. I feel like more people need to know about neuroscience and to, really know that everything that we eat and drink is part of, what happens to our brain. I think sometimes we make choices that aren't necessarily good for our brain. In the process of this, you learn a lot about yourself. Like I know, for example, that if I don't exercise regularly, physically exercise, I will be mentally ill. So it's just like you learn how to take care of yourself. And all the many studies show about Alzheimer's, degenerative diseases that affect the brain are really mitigated by regular exercise. Those strands of neurons that clump together with the proteins. When we sleep, what happens with our brain is that it washes itself. And so the debris from, things and are washed when we sleep. So that's why we're refreshed. When we wake up, that feeling of being refreshed, it's like, you really did take a shower in there. Actually, one of the other, what am I doing time-wise? One of the things that I've done recently, I just had a podcast interview yesterday with a sleep medicine doctor, and we were digging more into that, the sleep. And how it affects your brain. But so I think that so sleep is seriously important. Getting really deep sleep is very important, and having enough of it and consistent patterns is really important. So I also believe that human stories heal, that when people can tell their stories, even if they're not, you know, whatever, our stories help other people look at themselves and feel like it's okay. In fact, like compared to my first book, this second book, these notes and calls and things, just so many people have related to what this is like. It's just been it's been terribly moving at points, that a lot of feedback and people sharing the book, and that's my hope. I would like to see it in, I had a lot of physicians look at it. I'm hoping someone will take it into a training curriculum, because doctors have said this will help other physicians. Narrative medicine needs learning from stories, and this is a story, and that would be my greatest hope, is that book clubs would read it and relate. People could tell their stories, and the physicians and nurses and would know more about the inside story of what it's like, because it's not something you can really describe very well unless you've been through it. And at the time, could not describe it at all. It's what the brain does to protect itself. It keeps your injury from you. So those are really the key things. Oh, the other thing, I think in terms of, well, I'll move into the creativity. Any questions here at this point, though?
Yeah, I have a question. Okay. First of all, what struck me about your book and your journey and your story was how easy it would be having a brain concussion, and people have car accidents all the time, and how easy it would be to discount that because it's not physically evident, and then you actually have a huge impact on your life without even knowing what was going on. And there was a point in your book that I thought was really poignant, where you were talking about there's so many things we take for granted about the brain, like insight. We have insight, we have self-awareness about ourselves, and could you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was really
yes,
really poignant, that you didn't have insight, and then Gary was helping you, and how you worked through that, because I thought
yes,
that was really challenging.
Yes, that reminds me of a conversation we had like within the last month or so. Yes, it's like I feel like, hey, I have insight. No, I'm insight. But I'm the king of insight. But I had zero, and that was a problem. What's interesting about it is that I watched. I think it's like 2006, and like I watched Oprah every day. I didn't watch TV all day, but I watched Oprah. I was enlightened. I read Eckhart Tolle, but my self-awareness was not high. And I think there's such an important point with that I was very present in my own way, but that it's the outside that we need. And to talk about the creative process, that's how that works too, that I can write like crazy, and everyone's first draft is like their own story, but you leave out pieces because you can't see it from the outside. So it's like we need information from the outside to have self-awareness, that me being present was me being present, and just, with all my blind spots, some of them physiological. So being mindful, and then also having teachers that can point out truths and things that we need to know to help us find our blind spots and see a bigger picture.
I'm curious about what happened and what were your feelings after you were shown this brain scan and saying that there's real danger here. How did you process that?
It was, thank you. Yeah. That's a really good question. It was a relief. It was a relief. It was like, I don't know, I felt kind of understood. In just sort of an odd way, it's like, maybe that's why my life isn't, it's like, it seemed to be going, like, mostly I try to keep myself in a good mood. So, but it was like, okay, that does explain things. Because people would ask me, it's like, oh, how does the injury affect you? Do you have problems staying organized? It's like, I just remember I couldn't answer that question. It's like, I have problems. I don't even know organized. It's just like I wasn't very present to sort of the categories of awareness. And I just, yeah. So I felt, initially I felt very shocked. And then I felt understood, like I had a real thing, like I just wasn't being lazy and not, able to put myself together and move forward. That, not that my husband would pressure me, he was amazing, but, feeling like I wasn't sure I was doing my part. And so it made it easier to get treatment and stick with it. Yeah, that's interesting. And now, so when I work with people, I'm into benchmarks. I'm into, okay, we take this test here, we do this, we do this, we compare this with this. It's like, I really want to create benchmarks for people. The software I use in my practice is very, they fill out things, I fill out things, and so that's really important to me. But I mean, as a field, it's just evolving. Any other questions at this point? Okay, so those are some of that's the journey. Some of the truths then, and we're getting to these, is that all anyone wants to do is feel normal. You see people that take drugs, that drink, that scream and yell, that whatever, all anyone wants is a brain that feels normal. And that's what we do. We do the best we can. So if someone, I mean, the brain of someone who's on marijuana and someone who has an alpha deficit, you can see why they would feel good. They're missing something, and so they're creating it. So we have our own crude, sometimes good ways of just making our brain work. That's what we're doing. So I think it takes the judgment away from me, where the things that we do to make our brain work. Like even ADD, like the kind that I had, we can still have like the high theta, slow waves. It's like I do things for excitement. I'm just trying to make my brain waves go a little faster. It's like day trading, all right. Put this down. It's like I felt alive. Taekwondo, yes. So yeah, I think that takes away the judgment. And I think that as a society, as we grow and we learn more about the brain, we will be able to help people better. We won't, those categories that we use. And even in our leadership, when things aren't working and we know more about the brain, it'll be clear. Like, oh, okay, this is what memory, this is self-regulation, this is, these are categories of brain functions that we can look for and hold people to standards on. So that's my biggest insight. I always felt in career coaching that I always had a certain number of people who love them, but they could never get clear on their career. And when I got further into this, I could see that they were never really looking at brain things, like they were never really probably clear on anything. So they would come to me and I would just feel like, oh, we have to get really clear on what they're going to do next. But if they weren't clear in any category of their life because of their brain, that probably wasn't going to happen. And so now I approach my career practice much differently, like, hey, how much exercise are you getting? Let's find those shoes and small steps to getting more brain power into bringing it into it. So yeah, a lot of magic went into finding Elsa. My friend who thought I was mad at her ended up editing the book. I went online to, I heard you have to have 1,000 followers on Twitter, so I tried to figure out what that was. This was a couple years ago, and I ended up loving social media, and I was like, had 4,000 followers in 4 months. But one was a woman who taught at this Harvard Medical School conference, and she said, we do a conference on publishing, and I'm going to be part of the program. And so I told her a little bit about my project. She said, you should go. So I went, and then I pitched my book at this publishing conference, and I got a lot of real good support. And then, so I wrote the book, and I was all ready to go back and pitch it to get a publisher and all, and the pandemic came. It was canceled. And so that was pretty, who could be sad about your book not going to a book conference, even though you wrote your whole book waiting for it? But when people couldn't go to their proms, or, other things that were just so much bigger, people were dying. But I was, in time, kind of felt disoriented about it. So one of my really good friends said, I want to take away all your excuses. She would ask me over and over again, like friends do. When's your book coming out? When's your book coming out? I mean, that's another whole seminar, but friends, and what they ask you when you're writing a book, you first start it, they're going, when's it done? Like, when can I read it? When will it be at Amazon or in the bookstore? But anyway, so I said, well, I was going to that conference and it was canceled. And she said, I'm going to make this happen. I will pay for this. I'm going to take away all your excuses. And it was like, wow. And it happened just like that. I mean, she put up a sum of money. We found, I didn't expect to self-publish my book, but I found a hybrid, and so they did a really nice job with it. But I wrote about that because I think as writers, we think of ourselves as suffering and all those things and vow poverty, but you never dream you could be someone's legacy. I mean, she's the happiest person in the world next to me, because it's like I helped Diane publish her book, and for her, it's like learning to accept gifts. Oh my gosh! Like, I said no at first, and my husband was like, what? I said no. You said no? You've been pretty miserable about this. Like, she'll pay for the whole thing, like all the publishing. I'm going, I can't accept that. And so I went back to her, and she's like, I guess you just don't even think of yourself as like making someone happy with your work. Like, oh my gosh, I get to see her today. She lives in Florida, but so anyway, yeah, someone's legacy. So basically there's just a lot I could say about the creative process. Mostly I think it's really a lot about meditating and understanding and dealing with all your demons of this isn't good enough, this won't work, who wants to hear your story, and trying to find your center and flow, and just the whole practice of breathing and sharing that, and then getting information from the outside, where people at the end, I shared it, the final sharing, people are like, wow, this is really good. That was kind of surprising because it's a very insular project, but getting the information out from outside of you to shape it and to bring it to market. And then one of my friends from this class I'm taking on writing sent me this cover and said, this is your cover. I mean, just like that, she's an intuitive. People tell you they're intuitive and you go, right. Like, really? I don't think so. This friend is intuitive. She just does intuitive things. She just, this is perfect. And I said, I don't want to fall in love with an artist's work and then not be able to get it. It'll be too expensive. He'll be dead, and things like that. And I found him. He's a Vietnamese artist in North Carolina. I was a tutor for Vietnamese families when they came over. His family came over on boat people, and I was actually, this is years ago, a tutor for boat people. So I felt like we came full circle, and it was sort of meant to be. So they give you a form to fill out to license a art product, and I filled it out. Made other forms, filled those out. They said, you gave us a lot of information. You were we didn't read the whole book, Diane, but, you know, we think this is a good fit. So anyway, just a lot of magic, I think, goes into creating things, like being here today and talking about it and, you know, having people care about it. So that's pretty much my talk today is, I just think really when the messages I have are around brain health and brain awareness, that you know, being Buddhist, just assume we are, and it's like we understand the mind, or we revere the practice of being present, and I think that's just so powerful. And then, you know, listening to science and using the tools around us, and the interconnection between us as these vessels, these beings, and the outside as we, with Elsa, with my editor, with the artist, you know, we can create beautiful things and help others. So that's my wish. Thank you for listening. So in that, like, pick people to surround you. Like these are great people to surround you. And in our podcast, it's like great people too. It's like I just picked all these wonderful people I wanted to interview. Like this physician yesterday on sleep, she trains athletic teams. She's just so amazing. You have to see our podcast on Thursday. She's fantastic. I could have talked to her all day.
The book has tons of science on how the funny stories. Is there one you'd like to share? Three trains in a taxi?
No, not that. That's a long story. No, there is this story about how when I got this idea, it's like, okay, I have a brain injury. That's like, you know, official. And so I went to this bookstore where I had launched my first book, and this woman, I heard she had a head injury, and that didn't mean anything at the time until later. And then I thought, oh, I should get out more. And so we went to a book signing and opening there, and I ended up talking with her. And I said, you know, I had a head injury. And she said, I love your shoes. And I go, and then, I mean, they were really cute shoes, okay? And then I looked surprised, and she goes, in your hair. And that was like our conversation. And I don't fault her for that, because it was in the middle of an event and she was probably busy, but I think that embodied a lot of how people could handle that discussion. And that's why I would write a book instead of talking about it. It never fit in any conversation. It's like, oh yeah, I had a brain injury. It'd be like, oh my God, this doesn't go anywhere. But hopefully by doing this, that it makes it easier, because people are telling me their stories, and I think that's good. But that is exactly what she said. I love your shoes. Oh my God. Any other questions or comments?
Oh, I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, it's not really a question. I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your story. About a year and a half ago, I was in a really, I had a concussion, and I was hospitalized for 3 days for it. It was awful. And I think you put it into words so well. And nobody can really prepare you for the absolute foreign feeling that you'll have in your own body after sustaining something like that, and not being able to like really tell people like, oh, sorry, I had a brain injury. It's not really, you don't really bring it up in conversation. So just thank you so much. I've never met somebody that I can relate to like that.
Thank you. Thanks for thanks for sharing that. Hopefully we'll make it easier for other people and know that people can recover. I think with tools and being able to talk about it and get resources, that's really promising. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Is meditation any different for you now?
Let's see. It was really nice this morning. It was just really, really nice sitting here and meditating. I'm doing a lot of breathing. I'm doing this heart rate variability training, and I have a chest strap and all these gadgets. I'm like a gadget person, and so I think I'm more into breathing than meditating right now. I think, and I do the breathing for this class I'm taking twice a day for 20 minutes, which is really a lot for me. So yeah, I enjoy meditating, but I'm also aware that I'm trying to figure out like what's the best thing for me. And again, meditating this morning, it's like, wow, if I get really relaxed, how's that going to work? So then I started counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2. So it's all an experiment.
This is Mark, and I've been reading a book by Mark Epstein. It's called The Trauma of Everyday Life.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I was just wondering, because certainly that was a traumatic experience for you, and which I'm a therapist as well, and so I understand the deep impact emotionally this has on people. The emotional experience can be all over the map. You mentioned all the losses, that's a lot of deep grief going on, and just the loss of your ability, your brain threw you totally upside down. Such a major loss. And of course, grief has so many different emotions with it: anger and sadness, denial, finally acceptance and integration. Could you say a little bit about that with your experience?
Yes, thanks, Mark. That's a super important point. I remember going through this and fighting with my therapist, and I look back, it's like, didn't he get it? Like what was happening with me? But he didn't. But it was a very, very difficult time. And then as my brain healed, and I won't detail this too much, but it just became clear. I remember my doctor saying, your brain is healed, but you've been traumatized. And so I went through EMDR, eye movement desensitization, where they, do you know anything about that? It's like when the memory is stuck and your brain can't quite process it. And the trauma, so when I rode in cars, this is so funny because I didn't realize this until someone visited, but I would just be like, no, yelling and going, no, they're going to hit us and all that. But I had a real traumatic response. And so I went through EMDR to desensitize that, and it changed a lot of things. So she made the distinction that you're making, and that's that my brain was healed, but my brain was traumatized. And so I had to go through training, and I think in some ways I'm still traumatized by it. I don't think it's totally, just to be really honest, I don't think it's gone. I think it's a big thing to go through, to have your, your brain damaged, injured, traumatized. So it works, but it was an emotional trauma.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, EMDR helps the, like there's a little seahorse-shaped structure in your brain called the hippocampus, and what it does is it processes memories, and so when memories are too big for your brain to process or too emotional, then they get stuck. And so situations that look sort of similar trigger that response. It's like if you were in New York during 9/11, and then later on, maybe you hear sound, it sort of triggers that, and you feel like you're there because your brain is processing it that way. So what EMDR does is it helps your brain process that information, which is, I think, kind of interesting, because I read a study that the volume of the hippocampus is constricted because it's holding on, and then with EMDR, the volume, they increase, so that the memories the brain works different, because, and EMDR was really fascinating, and I became trained on it because it's fascinating that someone would go like this, or you would follow a stimulus, and then your mind would begin to process what it couldn't process because you're in a different place. And it's just amazing to do that work.
Did that help your emotional experiencing then?
Yes, a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I'm pretty moved even in talking about this. I'm sort of new at it. I mean, my book just came out, and before that I was pulled away working on it, writing about it, but but it's still a pretty emotional topic.
Yeah, for sure.
So with heart rate variability training, what you do is just like what you do here. You breathe through the emotions, and they'll get better. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate this. So this has been very fun. I just think, like, stay really curious about the brain, learn all you can. And here, this is just like, I know you wrap neuroscience into things. You're a part of it. You're such learned people. You're such, like I am, or you're very curious and good teachers. This is really a good place for learning, and to hold that learning, integrate it. I know, yes.
Well, I read the book, and I found it very interesting, and I highly recommend it for anyone to read. Just that journey of self-discovery, and even though things are foggy, you know something's wrong, kind of. So it's really fascinating. It read kind of like a mystery, right? But wonderful tips on self-care as well. So I highly recommend it. And I know we have a few minutes left, and you wanted to also do some little brain dancing.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to say so I had people review it before it went to publication because it was kind of insular, and both Robert and June read it. I was so glad. And their comments are inside here. So, and on the website, it was really an honor to have you both involved, and it's really nice.
It's so enjoyable reading. It was funny. There were some really funny parts.
Yeah.
Even though you were talking about something very serious, a lot of humor in it as well.
Those comments were surprising, because you kind of get used to your own humor, and then people go, "It's funny." It's like, it is? Okay. I'm funny. Call my friend Ian. Ian, guess what? I'm funny.
Also, we do a workshop. You might want to
Yes.
mention that.
Yes, I have a workshop coming up on August the 6th. It's an hour-long masterclass. And if anyone here wants to register, we'll send you a code. It's not expensive, but we'll give you even a bonus, like 50% off. It's on neuroscience advantage in daily life. It's a lot about sleep. I love learning about sleep and helping people sleep, and memory and focus. So it's a master class. It should be really fun. It's on Zoom. Yeah, and our podcast in the pandemic, what I wanted to do is to have people to be hear human stories and voices and to be held up and to be called to their highest person during this craziest time. And so I just found, and I could interview, I'm sure all of you, but I found people that mostly that I knew from Twitter, and I interviewed them, and it was really nice. And now I'm doing a series on peak performance athletic training, and so I have Dr. Sang this week, and I have a music therapist from Oak Park, Victoria Storms will be on it, and some other really interesting folks.